A lot of our entrepreneurs are actually very good. So if you talk to most VCs across the region, be it Singapore or Jakarta, a lot of them will say Malaysian entrepreneurs are some of the best in the region in terms of ability to execute. They have the best P&Ls. But what we do lack is our guys need to go out there and raise funds from outside of Malaysia because that's kind of where the capital is. And to raise funds outside Malaysia, you need to tell a regional story. You need to show that you're going to grow your business, not just in Malaysia, but you can grow your business in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Thailand, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, and you have to tell that story. And if you don't have that story, it's very difficult to convince a regional investor to invest in your company. So Malaysians need to think regional from day one, have that ambition from day one. Otherwise, they will always be seen as like a local champion or a juara kampung, as they say, just focusing very much on the Malaysian market versus growing beyond Malaysia to other markets, right?
Welcome to the iSearch podcast. Today we have Aaron Sarma, the general partner of Scale Up Malaysia on the show. So Scale Up Malaysia is an accelerator that focuses on growth stage companies and have investment in over 30 companies since 2020. So today we discuss with Aaron on the fundraising tips and also advice for entrepreneurs and startups in Malaysia. So welcome to the show, Aaron.
Hey Ben, nice to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
All right. So having invested in like over 30 companies in like 2 years, so what are some key areas to look for before you decide whether should I invest in this startup?
Cool. It's a great question. We've done 30 companies over a couple of cohorts or like groups of companies that we've invested in over the last couple of years. I always have an analogy that I use when we look at companies, right? And it's the analogy of like a racetrack where, a horse racetrack, right? Where, there's the jockey, there's the horse, and there's the racetrack itself. And we'd say like, a startup, when you look at a startup, I use this paradigm to make like a decision of whether we should invest in the company. And in the early stage, you spend a lot of time understanding the jockey, the guy riding the horse, right? And part of the reason is because I guess in the earliest part of the business, the most important thing is the team and the people who are building the company. Because we've all seen projections, we've seen like roadmaps, and we've even seen fully built products that may not stand the test of time, but a good team will be able to navigate difficult situations and will be able to build a business regardless of the market's trends or what's going on. So we really focus very, very heavily early on understanding the team, understanding what their behavior is like, what kind of the dynamics within the team, also trying to understand a little bit about their mentality as founders, right, about what they're trying to build. The next rubric or the metric that we look at is the horse, right, which is the product itself. So we do spend a lot of time understanding the product, what they're trying to build. I tend to look for strokes of brilliance in what they build. Like I am very interested to see if they've really put in effort to build a beautiful product, or they've put in a lot of time to think through what they're doing. They don't have to get it right, but what's really important to me is to see that they've really put in the time and the energy and the brain power behind building the product that they have. We also want to see does the product really serve a need, serve a market? Does it really help customers in a meaningful way? And ultimately, given the kind of investments we do, we want to make sure that product can scale from a small group of customers to a large group of customers. And finally, I think the last thing in the three dimensions that we look at is the racetrack itself, which is we want to make sure that the market is indeed interesting. So, if you've got a good founder, a really good product, but if you serve like 10 people, not really interesting for us as an accelerator or as a VC firm. We're really looking at companies that can grow and scale. So you really need to show and demonstrate to us that you are in fact serving a very large and attractive market. And that comes from helping us understand who your competitors are, helping us understand what the current makeup of the market is like, how customers get that benefit today, and how your product and your service is going to transform that market in some way. But like I said, when I first started answering the question, the most important thing in an early stage startup is the team and the founder, right? And so for us, a lot of the investments we've made has been really based on looking at the market, looking at the product, all that's really important, but really about the founder. And is this founder somebody who can go the distance and somebody who's able to kind of learn and grow as they're building the company?
Okay, interesting. Okay, then I guess the next one is what type of because the second thing they mentioned is about the product, right? So what type of traction should the founders sort of see before they start to raise funds and also pitch? Because I'm sure that starting from zero is very hard to raise funds, right? So what type of traction do they need to demonstrate before they even start to pitch the investors?
Yeah, maybe I'll address that second part of your question first, right? I mean, you said that starting from zero is hard to raise funds, and let me tell you why this is the case, right? 10 years ago, when you wanted to start a startup, it was way more complex. In the sense that you needed to have more capabilities in terms of website development, or at that time, early stage app development. You also probably need to have a better understanding of technology, and it would have taken you a lot longer to get a product up and running. These days, given the tools that are available to most entrepreneurs these days, there are no-code solutions, there are low-code solutions. There are things you can do quite easily to test your thesis out pretty early.
Yeah.
A lot of investors realize that the barrier to entry for most companies, I mean, unless you're putting men on Mars or you're trying to launch rockets to the sky,
Elon Musk.
most startups are not doing this, right? They're trying to build something with software. A lot of what you want to build can be built with tools that are already existing and are already there. So we actually, when we look at founders, right, if they don't have an existing product or they're using an existing product, I do see that as being rather scrappy, and that's a good thing, right? You're able to kind of prove that your business actually exists before you're going to spend more money building it. So I think part of that is why the barriers to entry, or the reasons that a VC would invest in a startup, has kind of been pushed back a little bit than what it was before. Because before, you could actually raise money 10 years ago and say, I got an idea, here's my deck, give me money so I can launch my company. That doesn't exist anymore because people want to see that you have some sort of traction, right? And so in our case, we do look for traction when we invest. And it's really to show us that you're not just looking for the money, but you can actually deliver on something. And I think that's really important, at least for an early stage founder, to show that you can actually deliver. Maybe it's delivering a couple of initial partnerships or initial commercial contracts that you got from certain B2B partners. Maybe it's a funnel or traffic source that's really good and you kind of sign a deal with them. Maybe it's because you built a great product and you've already got early users and you're showing that you're delivering value to those users. And these are things that we look for in early stage companies. If you're raising funds, how much traction? It really depends on your business and what you need for your business to grow. So I wouldn't recommend you trying to raise funds if you're doing it for cash flow or to stay alive. That's not a reason to raise funds. The reasons VCs will want to invest in you is because you're raising capital to grow. And you need more capital than you could probably muster up yourself to grow, or from your balance sheet to grow. Instead, what you're looking for is you're looking for capital to start a new market, or do a product extension, or execute on a commercial contract, and you need the capital to do so. These are things that really will make it very interesting for an investor to come in, because we see, hey, you know what? You need this help to get you further, but you've already done 80% of the work. The capital just takes you over the line. And that's the kind of thing that most VCs will look for.
Means it's you, at least when you're pitching, you have a purpose already. It means I need, let's say, this 200,000 to do this X, Y, and Z. Is not because I need this 200,000 to pay my salary and survive.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
So those kinds of things don't really exist anymore. In a sense that most institutional investors will not invest if that's what you're coming with. Maybe you can get an angel investor to do it, and that's only because the angel investor will say, I believe in the founder and I believe in the guy running the business. I want to help the guy through a very difficult period. That may be the case. But in most cases, what you'll find is that a VC or an institutional investor will say, no, show me you've done the work. Show me you've got a really clear business case for what you're doing, and you're raising money to grow, to scale, and to achieve some meaningful milestone. That's why you want my capital.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, got it. 'Cause I think one thing that you say also is very true is that we no longer need to learn how to code to like do website. Because like let's say 10, 20 years ago, you need to code. But then now there's like
Yeah.
WordPress. It's like so easy. It's like you just drag and drop. There's even like ready-made templates for you to like start testing out the market already. But then of course, you need to spend money on like maybe sort of like Facebook ads or Google ads to like sort of like test how's the reaction of the market to the thing that you want to build. I guess that's like
Yeah,
the
like, I
initial
mean,
stage.
like the websites for Scale Up, Malaysia is also on a website builder. My other incubator, Remote Ventures, we also built ours on an incubator. My personal website, aaronsarma.com, also built on a website builder. It's like you don't actually need to hire a developer to do these things nowadays.
Yeah.
People can actually get to a point where you actually can show traction, and then it makes a lot more sense to invest because you're showing traction. In fact, like, I've done a couple of investments recently where we found the entrepreneur as somebody who's already built something on WordPress, and the entrepreneur had done such a good job already generating sales, generating returns, and she came to us and said, like, I would like the investment because I'd like to take the business to the next stage, and I'd like to rebuild the platform, but I've already got traction here, and I'm going to use the learnings I've gained from WordPress and building it on WordPress to make it a fully functional product and take it to the next stage. And that thesis makes a lot of sense because you've already kind of shown that there's actually customers for this, and you've already shown that there's some sort of the people want this and are willing to pay for it, and that's like, most of the battle won already.
Okay, got it. So would you say like it's better? What are your thoughts on say bootstrapping versus raising funds at the start? Should they start with bootstrapping first?
Absolutely. I think, the best thing you can do right now for your company is to start with your own capital. And when I say capital, it doesn't necessarily have to mean money, but it's also your own time. And you should do the work early on, because you should not be experimenting with other people's money. Right? When you raise money from other people, you have become a custodian of somebody else's capital, and you're responsible for it. And so at the end of the day, these people are giving you money because they trust you. And so because of that, whether it's an angel investor, a VC, a government grant, or whatever, right? They're giving money because they trust you. So you should not be doing wild experiments with other people's money. You should have done most of the work yourself. And if you've done most of the work yourself, it's way easier for you to take the capital to kind of grow the results rather than, let me see if I change the color of my website, what happens, or if I move the button here, what happens, or if I try a new business model, let's see if that works. You shouldn't use other people's money to throw stuff against the wall to see what sticks.
Okay, got it. So next one is an interesting question. Like, how's the fundraising process looks like at Scale Up Malaysia? Like, like is it like a Shark Tank model? Like entrepreneurs pitch about their business, and then few investors decide whether to invest, and then they negotiate on equity, and then like the Mr. Wonderful will start to come in and say that I want a royalty for every sale that you make, or maybe like Mark Cuban will say like I want 20% for 200,000. Is it something like that at Scale Up Malaysia?
So it's nowhere as glamorous or as interesting looking, and of course it's not recorded or on live TV, right? So it's not. I don't think it's like that. Though I know people have described it in that way, in a sense that you have to pitch in front of a panel of people. We actually have taken a very different process to how we look at companies. These days what we do is you normally would pitch to a founder like myself. I get tons of guys reaching out to me on LinkedIn or on my website. Or
I have a great idea.
Or email. People find my email lying around the place. They drop an email, and I've got a phone number that I share publicly. So these are ways people reach out to me, and I will respond at some point, right? So and so people then tend to speak to a partner, so it's either myself or my other partners, and they spend time with us talking about the business. And if one of the partners likes the business, then we will recommend them to go through what we call a process, right? We'll recommend them to our team. We'll have our team of analysts take a look at the business to understand it better. Our analysts will kind of give a rundown of the basic thesis of the company and a bit of information to us as partners about what the business is about. And then we'll bring in one or two of our other partners to take a look at it. So we'll have one partner in Scale Up look at the product and see what you've built, and the other partner will come in and look at go-to-market. How are you taking this business from here to the moon, right? And what is that strategy? After that, this could be 3, 4, maybe 5 meetings, normally online, but I like to do things in person as well because sometimes you learn a lot more from an entrepreneur when you spend time with them in the flesh, right? And so we do those kinds of sessions. And then we bring it towards our investment committee panel. So that may involve a pitch that you have to do, or we'll pitch it for you. And if our investment committee panel decides to invest in your company, you'll get an investment offer from us, and then you can opt to take it or not take it, right? After a decision is made and you sign our term sheet, then we go into due diligence where we understand your company a lot better. You'll be at that point giving us more information about your business. You'll be providing some disclosure on some information. And then upon disclosure of that information, you'll sign a shares agreement, and then we'll be off the races and we're on board with your company. The whole thing probably takes a month to 2 months at the most, but you'll get a term sheet within 5 meetings, whether or not we want to have you on board. So pretty painless in terms of how long it takes for you to find out if we're going to invest in you. In terms of negotiation for equity, just remember that Scale Up is an accelerator business, and so everybody who joins our accelerator gets more or less the same deal. Actually, it is the same deal. We invest $100,000. We take the same amount of equity from everyone, and they are part of our program regardless. We do the off and on investment as a VC. Normally, most of those investments are for our existing companies, which are people who are part of our program already. And that is based on valuation. And that one will do up to $250,000 to the company. So we're very early stage, but to a lot of these entrepreneurs who come to us, we are like the first institutional check they've ever received in their life. And so we're kind of like training wheels for them when they start talking to other VCs. They come to us and we help them kind of get ready for that.
Yep. And I think that the first ever check that they get, like from investors, like it's not a small amount, right? Like 100,000 USD, you're talking about like 450,000 ringgit, and most of the entrepreneurs, like, they are based in Malaysia as well, right? So like 450,000 ringgit, they can definitely live a good life with it if they want to use the money for their own self, lah.
So
But,
obviously you can't do that. We actually have in the first couple of cohorts we give a little bit less money actually. So the first cohort we give 200,000 ringgit. The second and third cohort we started doing 250 ringgit. It's only in this most recent cohort that we're now recruiting for that we've bumped it up to $100,000. And the reason we've kind of increased the sum, obviously over time I think we've gotten better in terms of understanding what we want in a company. The other thing that we also felt is that capital is really key in the early stage of a company. We want to make sure that we're giving you enough resources to really make a dent, right? Versus not doing so, right? Where some entrepreneurs, you get a small check and then you really can't do much with it. And we want our companies to be competitive regionally. So we wanted to increase our check size so that companies are actually effective on a regional basis.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And just like you mentioned, 100,000 USD, how much of equity do they have to give up?
Yeah, we take a flat 9%.
9%, okay. Right, yeah. I think that sounds fair.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the next one is, what are some criteria like for a startup before they apply for your accelerator?
So we're quite transparent about what a company needs if they were to come and participate in Scale Up. It's mostly on our website, but I'll just run a list for you guys here, right? First of all, we want you to be a company that's in a high growth business, right? Which means that you've got a platform that is going to grow. We actually do want you to tell us if you've got expansion plans. We like it if the expansion plans are global, if not regional. We also want to see at least that you have some sort of traction. And on our website, you'll see that we are looking for at least 300,000 ringgit in revenue in the last 12 months. So we recognize that 300,000 ringgit is not a lot of money. It's meaningful money for an early stage company, but it's not a lot of money. But what we're really looking for is to ensure that you have the ability to execute, and that there are actually people paying for your product, right? And so if you're able to meet that standard, at least we feel that you're something that we want to talk to, right? And at least talk through your business and see what's going to happen, which is why we don't really take like pitch deck level ideas or idea level companies. There are other accelerators out there which I think you should talk to, or other programs that you can be a part of. But for us, we want to work with companies that can grow and scale almost immediately. We do look for a strong technology bent. So I mean, off and on, I'll get the random restaurant reaching out to me and asking, is this something for me? And I have to politely say not really, because we do look at technology as kind of the way to grow. And that is important to me, because we need that ability to help the company grow beyond the borders of Malaysia. And generally speaking, not all the time, it involves some sort of technology advantage. And so that's why we kind of focus on that. We also look for companies in verticals where we see that they're able to kind of make a dent. So we actually look at their market, look at their potential customer, and it's always a good thing if your customers love you. So I think that's really important as well. Yeah.
Do you check their Google reviews or their online
Sometimes
reviews?
we do. Yeah, sometimes we do. So we've got a team of analysts to do all this stuff with us as well. And so we check online reviews. We try to get... we've actually gone to Google Play Store as well to see what's happening there, just to see what's really going on, right? And we're also not so terrible about it, because we also recognize that at the early stage, you don't have a lot of stuff in order anyway, right? At this point, you probably have some revenue, you probably don't know what to do with it, you don't have a fully fledged team, so we're not too critical about it. But we want to have a conversation if there are some, maybe some bad reviews, or if there's some things that maybe make us raise an eyebrow or something. We definitely want to have a conversation around it, but it's not like a deal breaker for us for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I think one of your criteria that you mentioned is 300,000 revenue per year. So if you look at it, like let's say 12 months is only about 20,000 revenue. That's not profit, right? So yeah, I think it's pretty fair.
Actually, it's not even per year, it's the trailing 12 months, in the last 12 months.
Last 12
so
months.
you could have had, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and then suddenly you have a surge in the last 6 months. It's still okay, right? So we're because we recognize that, if you're an early stage company, you've just launched within the last year, you can't have that much revenue anyway. And you're trying to get to a point where you can take off, right? And so that's kind of at the point we want to get involved. Yeah.
Okay. And what if there's this scenario where they didn't hit the 300,000 revenue, but then they have a lot of users? Let's say they only have...
Great question. Thanks for asking that. Yeah. So actually there are rare occasions that we've actually made exceptions to these rules, right? And it's actually exactly in the case that you just mentioned, right? Like if the startup can show us that, look, we've not achieved your revenue target, but we've got X number of users, or we've got commercial contracts with companies which you feel, right, once you start executing, this is a big deal, right? Commercial contract, or some sort of pipeline that could be quite meaningful and interesting, we will definitely have a conversation. I'm not saying that it's a yes, but it's definitely a conversation. And if we are able to wrap our heads around that funnel process, or where the business is coming from, it could actually be, for sure, let's do this, right? Because revenue is just a marker, and we just put it there as a marker. But what we're really looking for is, can you execute? Are you able to deliver? And once we put our money in, how much more success does that give you to get your business to become that regional play?
Okay, great. Okay, so the next one is something that I'm personally also very curious. In your opinion, why are there so few startups in Malaysia that have succeeded? What's lacking in the current startup ecosystem in Malaysia?
I'll take this a step back, actually. I think there's just too few startups in Malaysia to begin with. Right?
That's true.
As a reflection of per capita compared to our regional neighbors, we don't have that many startups in Malaysia, which is really something that troubles me a lot, right? And it's true because I'm sure as you do research for this podcast, you keep seeing the same names pop up over and over again. And it's probably because there aren't that many people to call, right? There are not that many startups in the region. Part of this has a lot to do with, the talent pool that we have here. because there aren't many people who want to start a startup. And part of it has to do with access to capital and ability to grow the company, right? Some of it is also resources with training and people capacity building and stuff like that. So there are different elements to it, right? But I do feel like the first mover should be to allow people to create new companies. And there are, of course, some cultural challenges here where we need to teach people it's okay to fail. Launch something, don't work, never mind. You can still have a job. You can still do something else. You can still work for another company. But really, we need to create a culture where people want to create new startups and create new ideas and be willing to try. I think the other challenge in Malaysia is the access to capital is very limited, right? And so I can count with one hand the amount of VCs in the space who are active in the early stage where we are, right? And that's a problem because if there are only 5 guys, or maybe it's max 7 people at the most, but probably about 5 active VCs in the early stage, it means that we can only write so many checks, right? It means that we cannot fund that many companies, and because we can't fund that many companies, and we know that the success ratio from early stage to the Series A stage to the Series, it only gets more and more difficult to succeed. It's quite obvious why people don't get to the next stage, because the layers are so thin at the early stage. And so I think one thing that if I were to talk to a policymaker, and one thing we do talk a lot about is we need to put a lot more of our efforts in creating more early stage startups, right? Access to capital is important. I think we need to make sure that we give the ability for VCs to really play a role in our ecosystem. And right now, a lot of the capital is in Singapore, so we need to bring that Singaporean capital to Malaysia, make it really interesting for them to invest in Malaysian companies. And all this can be solved by helping entrepreneurs in Malaysia grow. A lot of our entrepreneurs are actually very good. So if you talk to most VCs across the region, be it Singapore or Jakarta, a lot of them will say Malaysian entrepreneurs are some of the best in the region in terms of ability to execute. They have the best P&Ls. But what we do lack is our guys need to go out there and raise funds from outside of Malaysia because that's kind of where the capital is. And to raise funds from outside Malaysia, you need to tell a regional story. You need to show that you're going to grow your business, not just in Malaysia, but you can grow your business in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Thailand, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, and you have to tell that story. And if you don't have that story, it's very difficult to convince a regional investor to invest in your company. So Malaysians need to think regional from day one, have that ambition from day one. Otherwise, they will always be seen as like a local champion or a juara kampong, as they say, just focusing very much on the Malaysian market versus growing beyond Malaysia to other markets, right? And which is, I think, very important for Malaysian entrepreneurs to think this way because that's really a competitive edge. By comparison, right, entrepreneurs in Jakarta don't have to think about going regional because Indonesia is such a big market. Yeah. It's quite obvious, right? But entrepreneurs in Singapore think regional from day one because they feel they have no choice. And so, which is why Singapore entrepreneurs will have market 2, market 3, market 4 launch within 18 months of them starting a startup, whereas a Malaysian founder will still be in Malaysia 18 months later. And so if you were to compare just on a growth story, which entrepreneur, if you start a travel tech company in Malaysia and a travel tech company in Singapore and you're doing exactly the same thing, but a Singaporean guy has a footprint of 4 countries and you have a footprint of Malaysia, it's pretty obvious which one is more interesting as an investor, right? And so we need to recognize that when we are building a company, we're competing against a region. So build competitive businesses that compete against a region. Think like a regional entrepreneur. Don't think like a Malaysian success story.
Yeah, I mean, I think most Malaysian entrepreneurs, they would think that I just want to succeed in Malaysia because if I go to, let's say, other countries, I have no money, which is what you mentioned just now on the problem of like a lack of capital. So, yeah, I guess.
But you see, the capital is out of the country. There isn't that much capital in Malaysia. And there is. I mean, you can raise money from people like us. There are other VCs in town who would write you like 100,000, 200,000 ringgit check, $200 US dollar check even. There are grants in Malaysia. But when you're trying to get from our stage to the next stage where you're raising like $1 million ringgit, 2 million ringgit, million US, the number of VCs in Malaysia shrink all of a sudden to a few people who can write those checks. And probably in a space of a calendar year, you probably can get maybe 20 checks written at that volume or that level in Malaysia, right? Probably across all the VCs that we have. So where else can you get those kinds of checks written? It's probably Singapore. And so you probably have to go and raise money from there. But if you're going to do that, then you have to think regional. You have no choice, right? And so I guess what's really important, and maybe to the question of whether or not, should you bootstrap a business versus should you just build a strong successful SME to building a startup. I think entrepreneurs need to think of what kind of business they want to run, because you can build a successful technology company in Malaysia serving just Malaysians and be relatively successful and be quite happy. Actually, there's no reason to make that a startup, right? But you will not have that $1 billion exit or that even $100 million exit, because that's a very different journey. But if you want to build that startup story, then recognize that fundraising is a part of it, and a regional growth story is also a part of it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, what are some opportunities currently in Malaysia that an aspiring entrepreneur should look into?
There's so many opportunities in Malaysia, actually. Some of which actually are stimulated by the government, actually. One of the things that the new Prime Minister said when he came into power was that he was looking at solving the cost of living crisis. Right? If you recall, one of the first things he talked about.
So that's why there's
I think
the
if I'm a
5 ringgit meal currently, the menu Rama.
Yeah, that's become the 5 million. But there are a lot of elements to the cost of living crisis, right? Some of it is supply chain. Some of it is reducing costs in terms of logistics. Some of it is increasing efficiencies in certain industries and markets. And so if I'm an entrepreneur, I'd be looking for ways to do that. Right? How can I solve the cost of living crisis, and what are the problem sets that I understand as an individual or as a group of founders, right? And how can I build something to solve that? So if I'm an entrepreneur, that's what I'd be doing right now. I'll be looking for problems, because entrepreneurs should be happy when there's a problem, because it means they can solve it and they can potentially monetize the solution. And that's how a great startup is built. So that in terms of what I would say if I'm a founder, just look for problems. Like if you see a problem on the road, there's this guy, don't know how people are parking on the road, don't know how people are collecting money, because it used to be you scratch a little ticket or you go to that machine and put your coins inside. So why don't we create a startup to solve that problem? And that's how Jom Parking started, right? Because they wanted a more efficient digital way to collect parking payments, and that guy is doing really well right now because he's found a problem, he solved it. He's now all over the world providing his solutions to different people. How did Ganesh from MOL start his business? They were working in cyber cafes back in the day, and they realized that they needed a way to collect payments, and said, hey, we'll help you collect payments through the cyber cafe network, and that grew into the first payment gateway service in Malaysia. So entrepreneurs, the problems are everywhere. Just look for those problems, and you'll actually be able to find great startup ideas that you can build on. And I love talking to entrepreneurs at this stage, right? When you've kind of, hey, I thought of this, what do you think? This is an idea, I want to just bat this off you. I saw this space, this is something I saw as an opportunity. I have an idea to do X, Y, and Z. What do you think? That's a great conversation to have, because before you write any line of code, before you go and call a single person, let's riff on it. Let's figure out what makes sense, and then go and try it out, right? And at that point, it's just ideas, and it's just getting the idea right before you execute it. That's interesting as well, to have a conversation at least with entrepreneurs. But in terms of verticals, if you're looking at verticals, one is cost of living crisis. Of course, that's a huge global problem right now.
Yep.
And with that comes supply chain. The other thing that's really interesting is agriculture, which I think is going to be a huge space in Malaysia. We've got a very large plantation hectare space in the country. A lot of people have built large plantations with corporates involved and large companies involved and multinationals and stuff. We also have smallholder farmers who are also occupying quite a bit of space here. And I think that's right for innovation, for entrepreneurs to find solutions, to build solutions for these people. And I'm working with a couple of great agriculture companies right now who are doing some really cool stuff actually in this space. So I would say that agriculture is something that's very interesting to me. Another thing that's really close to my heart is the idea of clean tech, because I think that's going to be a huge conversation topic over the next couple of years. We're moving away from fossil fuel energy to more renewable energy. So anybody who's building stuff in this space would actually be very, very in the right zeitgeist to build some really, really cool products. So look at those kinds of things. So my advice to any entrepreneur, you see a problem, that's your space, right? And there's an opportunity for you to build something that can be interesting.
Okay. Do you think age matters in entrepreneurship?
Not at all, actually. I have this conversation a lot with people because I think one of the things that people think about is they think that entrepreneurship is for young people. And in fact, right, they think it's like, for the college student who just left college or the guy who
Like the Mark Zuckerberg.
built something is like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, right? And every big company has this kind of story, right? This garage story. But the reality is, and there's research you can go and read about this online, that those stories are the outliers, not the norms. In fact, most of these guys are rarities. The guys, the young 20-some-year-old founder, they're the vast, the lower threshold of this. In fact, the most successful entrepreneurs are middle-aged guys. So, in fact, if you look at the actual numbers of entrepreneurs who are successful, the actual dollar returns of founders, it's actually older people. So, I think, A, we shouldn't put age as a number because you can solve problems at any age. But B, I do think if you're older, there are certain advantages that you do have. For example, you have the advantage of experience, meaning you've worked with people before, you understand how things operate. You maybe have some sort of skill set in a sector which could be valuable. You also have networks, so you know people who can introduce you to other people, or maybe people with money who can help you, right? So these are things that are core advantages of an older person. The younger person has the advantage of youth and energy and probably a higher risk profile than an older person because you don't have a family, you don't have obligations, so you're likely gonna say whatever, right? If it fails, never mind, I'll just go and do something else. Not so easy if you've got a family of 4 you're supporting with your salary right now, and to go and jump into a business, maybe not so easy. So I don't think you can put an age and number, but I do think that regardless of whatever age you are, you can always start a company. But what's important is that you see a problem and you solve the problem. Don't just say, I want to be an entrepreneur for the sake of it. You need to be solving a real problem.
And let's look at the current companies that you invest in, the 30 over companies, right? What is the typical age of the founders?
Actually, a lot of them are in the late 30s and early 40s. A lot of them. Actually, I'm on one of these panels where we do selection for these 40 under 40 type things, right? With one of the magazines here. And I have a difficult time every year when we do this because all of our founders are too old to be considered as recipients of these awards. So actually, we do have an older spread of founders who we work with. Yeah.
Which I think ties to what you say just now, that when they're older, middle-aged ones, they have more experience, and the younger ones, like I said, the college ones, they are the outliers, but they are the ones that get the most media publicity. It's like if you start a company at 21 versus 41, media will love to pick up the 21 years old, but the 41 years old one,
exactly, yeah,
they have more business depth to them. Yeah.
Yeah, the media loves stories like this, right? Because to the media, it's like, wow, it's this cool 20-some-year-old guy created this company out of his mother's basement or whatever, right? They love this kind of story, right?
Yeah.
Nobody has to talk about the balding 40-some-year-old guy who's doing something.
And I think I'm not sure whether is this applicable to other countries, but in let's say Malaysia, if you're middle age, let's say we put the age 38 or 40, I'm assuming that you're already earning good income, you're already comfortable, you have a family to feed, let's say your parents still around, your parents is already old, and you have kids. So even though you see a problem, you already have the experience, you have all the skills needed. But then you would think to yourself, why should I quit my job and start from zero and build things from scratch? And then if I build things from scratch, it will take probably a couple of years before I see a good amount of traction because things take time, right? So what would you say to this group of people?
No, but that's 100% the dilemma of an older person, right? Like maybe it's because of my background or my personal bio, but a lot of my friends who I grew up with come up to me all the time and say like, "Hey, I would love to start a startup like you, but this is why X, Y, Z, right?" And so. And as I said, maybe I have these conversations a lot more because of what I do for a living. But it is something that's true, right? Once you have success as an employee, once you have happy salary coming in every month, and once you're kind of comfortable, and you've got obviously obligations and commitments, and there's some lifestyle perks as well, right? If you work for a company that in like a multinational, you're flying business class everywhere, you're living in nice hotels, maybe if you're doing really well, you have a driver or something like that to drive you around. And so to go and say, hey, no, now you're gonna stop all that and you're gonna go and start a startup where you're gonna penny pinch every dollar you spend, fly the cheapest airline you can get on, live in like the some weird budget hotel somewhere when you travel to places. It's tough, very, very tough, right? And not to mention the tax on your family, right? Where you're gonna say, hey guys, this year probably can't go on family holiday because all my money is gonna go to my business, right? I was on a panel recently. I won't say with who, let the distance figure this out. And this was an entrepreneur who said on stage that, look, I had to sell my car to fund my business, right? And he was like, I guess like me in mid-40s. And these are difficult conversations to have, especially if you're an older person and you've got people who depend on you to have a good life.
Yeah. Whereas on the contrast is, let's say if I'm 21 this year, I have no experience, I have not much skills, but then I have the passion and I have the drive to like.
But but I guess the converse is true. Like there are a lot of young kids who are in college who say, I don't want to start a business because I want to get experience. I want to learn how to run a business. I want to maybe build my personal network and net worth. I want to save some money before I start a business. So I think no matter what age you are, there will always be a reason not to do something. Right? There'll always be something there'll be a reason you'll tell yourself and tell other people why you won't do it. And this is just normal, it's human nature. Which is why, just now I was saying like, the more important thing about being a founder or being an entrepreneur is that you really need to solve a problem that matters. Because if you don't solve a problem that matters to you, it really doesn't mean anything, right? Because you're always going to find a reason to not do the thing. If you're really passionate about solving a problem, then you will make every excuse to solve that problem and you'll make it happen, right? I always tell people that money is the worst motivator to start a business. In fact, it's statistically proven. Entrepreneurs who are mission-driven make more money than entrepreneurs who are money-driven. Because people who are mission-driven, the world rewards you for being mission-driven, for trying to solve a problem, versus the guys who are trying to make money, right? Money is a very, very poor motivator. Because the second you find something else that gives you more money, you go and do that. Versus the thing that you started, right? And so you shouldn't do a startup for the sake of money alone. It should be because you have a problem in the world that you feel only you can solve and you're passionate about solving it, and you can eat, sleep, breathe every day to solve that problem. That's why you should do a business, not to become an entrepreneur for the sake of the glamour. Because it's not a glamorous life. For the first 7-8 years of your life, you're not doing
lonely
very glamorous
life,
things.
It's a lonely life.
It's very lonely, yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you're looking for money, then probably just stick to like the employee route will be safer, and also you get what you want, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, that's a great point. Like you're more likely to make more money consistently as an employee than more money consistently as a startup founder or an entrepreneur, right? 92% of all startups fail. 92%. More than 9 in 10. That's a lot of failure, right, for an industry, and I think it's very tough for people to accept. So, I mean, I know we began this conversation asking why, I was saying there aren't many entrepreneurs in the market, and that's true too. But the way to have more success in Malaysia is to have more entrepreneurs, which is why I was saying that this is where we need to help entrepreneurs get started. We need to have prototyping grants to get them off the ground. We need to probably have early stage funds to give them that first check, just to kind of build that funnel where every step of the way they're getting support so they can grow their business. That will kind of dampen the risk level a little bit and will reward the guys who are actually deserving. And that's kind of how you build that funnel, right? Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're coming towards the end of the show. So before we go, Aaron, what is your outlook on fundraising in 2023? Like, I mean, given the massive tech layoff in all over the world and also like a potentially challenging year ahead.
Yeah, I've been saying this in a few interviews I've been giving recently, and please forgive me for those of you who are Game of Thrones fans, but basically winter is here, right? This is going to be a very difficult period for venture capitalists and venture capital recipients like founders, right? And part of the reason this is the case is because global markets are kind of slow right now. There's a lot of people who speculate that things will pick up towards the second half of the year, and that may be true, right? It's not to say that there's no money out there. A lot of VCs actually have what's called dry powder, which means there's money in the bank, right? They have the ability to invest, but they're kind of biding their time and waiting before making those investment decisions. So it just means that you'll have to spend a lot more time with VCs before you get an answer. You have to be a bit more patient, and you have to show a lot more resilience over the next 12 months or so before you actually get some money from a VC. I think maybe that is the word of the season. It's really the time for resilient entrepreneurs. People are strong and able to survive difficult moments. As an entrepreneur, you really need to focus now on your unit metrics, make sure your business is profitable, that you're able to kind of make ends meet on your own. And really the capital you raise from a VC is just to kind of give you that supercharge, it's that jetpack to your rocket, right? Basically to give you that boost to get you a little bit further. But otherwise, build businesses that really create value, that the fundamentals are strong, and pursue a problem set that you're really passionate about. That's really the more important thing. Because this year is going to be tough. But I think the guys who survive this year will be some of the legends we'll be talking about in the next decade. In 2008 when the market was bad, that's when Slack was formed. That's when Instagram started. That's when Airbnb started. These are legendary companies, billion-dollar companies, were formed in the last major recession, and the same thing will happen here, right? We kind of we don't think of it this way, but guys like Grab came out of the 2008 recession as well. They started in 2010, 2011, but it's around that period, and that's kind of how we saw the growth as well. So the vintage of 2023 will be one of the best vintages of startups that Malaysia has ever seen. So if you're building companies now and you're surviving this year, I think you survive through the year and you do well, I think you're on to being one of the best companies we've seen in a long time.
Okay, well, very motivating. So with that, let's end the podcast today. Thanks, Aaron, for coming on to the show. Check out Scale Up Malaysia down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Hey, thanks, Ben. This was a pleasure. Bye-bye.